So, yeah, I am astonished again. So how do I how do I feed more of my existing stuff into Wikidata, and how do I teach the real
Mhm.
home run?
Uh,
So Aaron Mahalik is one of the co-authors on the COVID and bipolar paper,
yeah,
and looping her into that was part of laying the groundwork to try to get her involved on the board. And if we could teach her and Hinshaw and Vieta how to do this, we would have some major influencers.
yeah, yeah. All right, I'm going to show you. I shall show you actually a gene structure. That's the one to do. Gene structure is the example. So just going to try and find the article on it. Gene structure. Oh my gosh, I can't spell today. Here we go. Okay, so here's the example Wikidata item for something. So I'm just going to quickly take us back to the Wiki journal page for it, just to orient us. So this was my initial introduction to wiki journals. I came across the idea and was like, this is a great thing. I'm going to submit something to Wiki Journal of Medicine. And so I did this,
Oh, I,
eukaryotic and prokaryotic gene structure. Um, and so this was before I was on any of the editorial boards or anything. Um, and yeah, I just did this diagram on gene structure because I was astonished that there wasn't anything previously existing. And it's like I was super thrilled with it. And not only is it a nice diagram, but all of the words in it are hyperlinked, so it can take you through to all of the actual Wikipedia pages on each of these items if you want to know more about an open reading frame or more about start codons or whatever.
is that adding the link inside the figure? Is that wiki markup, or is that something that you did in the software like Adobe to build the figure?
You can do it either way. So this one I did in Wiki Markup, and I've also done the same thing in Adobe separately, just because I was trying to test either way. It turns out when it's an SVG, it's really easy. So SVG is the open version of an Adobe Illustrator file, and it's just about human readable, and you can include the hyperlinks that way. But if you include hyperlinked text in Adobe Illustrator and save the SVG, it'll save it like this. But this is basically something in Wiki Markup where you basically state the image and then you state the text and its XY location within the image. So it's a bit of a bugger to do, and you have to say, like, the text regulatory sequence, I want you to include 12 pixels down and 50 pixels right, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
So it's probably easier to do it straight within the SVG. But either way, you can do it either way, and it works quite nicely.
that's beautiful. I've done a little
Um,
bit like that in R with some of actually, with the
mhm.
figures that I made for the meta-analysis that I'm updating. That was where I really had to learn about using reference coordinates and rows and to drop the text and
Mhm.
the, but okay.
Makes sense. So now we've got oriented on the article itself. Over on the left-hand side, it'll say, take me to the Wikidata item. So this is the data item that describes this. And if we go to the Wikidata item, every Wikipedia page has one, every Wikiversity page can have one. But more broadly than that, like every academic article has one, just like everything has one. So here's the item for, again, this scientific article published in 2017. It is Q288-67140. So this is a little bit like, in the same way that you have an ORCID identifier, this is like an ORCID identifier, but for anything, for a person, for a journal article, for a method, for anything. So here we go. It's an instance of a scholarly article. Here's its title. Here's its main subject. Its main subject is gene structure. Here are its authors, Thomas and Rowan. series ordinal 1, series ordinal, I don't know why that's 3, I'm going to edit that. So this should be series ordinal 2 because he's the second author. He's not the third author, there's only 2 of us. So I'm going to go in and edit this manually. So if I hit edit, then it'll say, okay, did we mean this row and low? Yes, we did. Are they stated as that? Yes, okay. They're actually series ordinal 2, publish. Cool, that's fixed. Publication date 2017, and here we start to get some of the more interesting information. So for example, we have significant events. So this was submitted on the 14th of November, but it was then subsequently merged into a Wikipedia page on the 25th of January in 2017. Oh, interesting. What was that URL? So here we go. Here's the Wikipedia page on gene structure. And we can see, oh yeah, Wikipedia, gene structure, same diagrams, and this article was adapted from the following source under a CC BY license, da 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 da. So this is how it's able to start encoding some more of this metadata and like include the copyright license and so on and so forth. But there's kind of no limit to the information that we can include in this. So we might, for example, this is a review article, it's not an experimental article, but if it was an experimental article, we could include the methodology that was used, or the equipment that was used, or the statistical tests that we used. So I could, and we could make more specific things about the main subject. So I might actually say, well, this is not just about the gene structure, this is about the gene structure of prokaryotes. A group of organisms whose cells lack a nucleus. Yep, that's the type of prokaryote I meant. Publish. And it's also about a second thing. It is about, add value, the gene structure, organization of elements within a gene. Yep, that's what I meant. Gene structure of eukaryotes.
I've seen a little bit of this uploading images on Wikimedia Commons. The wizard has some of this.
Yeah, same system. So this is basically like taking that thing on Wikimedia Commons and going into infinite detail if you decide to. So this is me manually editing items. So all items are manually editable in this way, which makes it pretty easy, whether it's something like this, or if I go to, for example, the concept of gene structure, I can say, oh, well, what do I mean by gene structure? Oh, well, it's the organization of elements within a gene. Interesting, actually. This is described by a source. This is not actually a very well organized item, so I might be able to improve this a bit. So I'm going to say, cancel. I'm going to say that this is an instance. Well, what is it? So each item should be an instance or a subclass, ideally. So an instance means an example, and a subclass is kind of a general categorization. So what is the concept of gene structure? Well, the concept of gene structure is, I guess, it's an instance of a categorization. Yeah, cognitive process by which arrangement. Yeah, act of arranging things in an orderly way. Yeah, that's fair enough. And I'm going to add the qualifier of a gene. So that's how we're going to sort of vaguely describe this item. And we can add, say that it's a facet of genetics, facet of the topic, so facet of topic of which this item is an aspect. This item offers a broader perspective on the same topic. Yep, this is an item of a facet of genetics.
Is this a SQL database at the back end, or what?
Exactly correct. Yep, it's a SQL database. More specifically, it's in a SQL database in what's called RDF format, the resource description framework, which is a really specific way of organizing your SQL database that allows open open data to communicate with itself, which is why we can then do a Sparkle query. So Sparkle is, again, this is just a SQL language, but specifically SQL for items that are SQL for items written in this particular RDF format. So I'm actually going to go up here and we're just going to go to Eric Youngstrom, look at your item, and I'll just see if I can, I just want to check that it's vaguely, there's a few bits. Okay, yeah, so it's already the employer.
This is what Sandy Georgia
so
left.
This is oh yeah?
She went through and ripped a whole bunch of stuff out of the page when she was reporting me up to AFCOM. She's like, "This is blatant puffery," and I'm like, "You couldn't be bothered to look me up in Google?"
So this is the structured data item about you, and you can see the various edits that have been done to this. So again, like on the Wikipedia page, there's going to be the the plain text version, but this is the structured information. So the way I pitch this is like, this is what a machine intelligence knows about you.
Yes.
Any AI knows this about you. It knows that you have sex or gender male, but that there's no reference for that. It knows that it knows your citizenship as United States of America. It knows your occupation as psychologist. So I'm going to use Sparkle, which is an SQL language, and ask the question, well, I'd like to see people who are psychologists. Well, let's have a look at psychologists. Yep, person who evaluates behavior. So I want people whose occupation is psychologist, and I'd also like people whose employer is that. Yep. So will it work out that I'm talking about the employer? Nope, I don't want educated at. I want employer. Yep, there we go. And it'll build me my Sparkle query, so I don't have to do that. But here we go. So we now have a list here.
Yep, there's my department.
Psychologists.
And,
psychologists who are employed
that are no longer employed at the UNC, but
well, that's because I haven't filtered it by people who are currently employed. So I can actually say, for example, I want to show only people who don't have an end date listed on their employment, because, for example, where it says employer UNCW, we could add the qualifier start time, and for people who are no longer working there, end time. So actually, when did you start at
2006.
University of North Carolina? Yeah, so let's add that now, 2006. Yeah, publish, there we go. So we could also convert this if I wanted to also say show start time. Let's see if it'll work out that I think I mean start time of, no, it hasn't worked out what I wanted the start time for. Well, actually, I want the start time for the occupation item. But so you can see how you can kind of build up these Sparkle queries into something quite complex, and you can then build timelines and things like that that'll automatically update. Actually, I'm just going to quickly go to your Wikidata, your ORCID, to make sure that your ORCID also states when you started. Yep, cool, it does. So I'm just going to use your ORCID as the reference for that, because as always, it is good practice in wiki stuff to cite your sources. So I'm going to pretend that I didn't just learn this from you vocally. I'm going to say that I cite this to your ORCID. There we go. And I suspect that University of Delaware, oh no, imported from English Wikipedia. That is bad form. I'm going to say again, this is from your ORCID.